Welcome back to Chelsea. Now, the showground is buzzing with excitement and thronging with visitors who are all flocking to revel in the greatest horticultural show on earth.
There is this extraordinary thing about Chelsea, that Chelsea we talk about as though it's a fixture in the season. So up until Chelsea, you're protecting things and it's spring and you're arriving. And suddenly, Chelsea week, you've arrived, it's summer, a new season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the 1st of June coming up, so technically there is summer just round the corner. Well, I couldn't agree more. As we hurtle headlong into summer, we've got plenty of ideas for your own gardens in any outdoor spaces you may have from the RHS Chelsea Flower Show 2022, an event supported by the Newt in Somerset.
Now, the Queen of the Great Pavilion, Carol Klein, will be sharing her pick of the bunch to bring a new lease of life to your planting palette.
Adam Frost encourages us to think outside the box and take inspiration from garden design that embraces distant shores.
And I will be meeting Sharleen Spiteri, the lead singer with the rock band Texas, who is also a passionate gardener.
Now, just a few moments ago, we announced the winner of the BBC RHS People's Choice Award.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
After Richard had a bit of time to take it all in, I joined him on the perennial garden. So, Richard, how are you feeling right now?
Emotional. So emotional. I mean, amazing, absolutely amazing. But it's incredible. This garden has created an emotional response with people. They've come up to me and they said, "Oh, we love it, we love it." And then they start crying. People cried. I had 2 people get engaged.
Really?
Oh, amazing, yeah.
What on the garden or?
Up there, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going up there then.
No, not with me. The first time they were, the guy was on his knee for about a minute and a half before his girlfriend said yes. So quite funny.
It's a very romantic garden, isn't it? It is a romantic.
With love.
And it's a classical garden, and I think people can really connect with it.
Yeah.
They think, I'd love to have a garden like that.
Yeah.
And it's the only formal layout in the whole show as well, which I think people love.
They do. I like to say timelessly elegant. But,
yes, that's your line, timelessly elegant.
Timelessly elegant. But yes, no, it is. I love symmetry. It really appeals to us. We're symmetrical as humans, and it works for us.
Yeah. And that is a big, there's a lot of designers who have been at Chelsea for many years who have never got people's choice, because it means you've completely connected with the viewers who have seen this garden on telly as well.
And it's very simple. I mean, the palette is very simple, white and plums. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, I mean, you really could lift some of this planting up, take it home and use it in your own garden, couldn't you?
You really can.
And there's a sort of classic Chelsea palette here as well, foxgloves and alliums and lupins, but you've weaved them all the way through. Yes. And I love the chamomile lawn too.
It just makes a lovely, lovely horizontal foil for the rest of the garden, or the uprights of the rest of the garden.
Yeah, and the formality with the trees, running through. And then, of course, you're large neon sign. That's quite a risky thing to do in a garden, I'd say. A very modern neon sign as a focal point at the back.
Why not? You need a focal point. And I've been wanting to do one for a long time, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's a great quote. I mean, it gives a contemporary twist to the whole space too. Yeah. So, what are you going to do now, Richard? Are you going to go and have a glass of champagne or something? Celebrate?
I think we deserve one. The team, perennial, absolutely amazing team. Charity, this is going to be great for them. They help people in horticulture. Yeah. It's a hard life for some people. And absolutely. I think we will be cracking open the champagne now and celebrating.
Perennial are a fabulous charity.
Absolutely. I'm so happy for them. They're a great team behind them. My great team, the landscaping team behind it, Stuart Landscapes. Really excited. Really happy for everyone. It means so much more.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
So, thank you, Jay. Really amazing.
Fantastic team. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, congratulations to Richard Myers, and thanks to all of you for voting. Now, whether Chelsea has given you the gardening bug for the first time, or whether you're a seasoned gardener but looking to freshen up your borders and containers, there is no one better to look to than Carol Klein for some new ideas.
If you're off to a nursery or the garden centre this weekend, I've got a few ideas that I hope will inspire you to try something new. Just look at this lovely combination here. When you're choosing plants, you're not talking about them living on their own. And Chelsea is full of ideas for combining plants beautifully. This is a combination that would thrive in shade. Chirophyllum hirsutum roseum, this lovely, pretty little umbel. And then another umbel in the background, an astrantia. Doesn't look like an umbel, first of all, because it's got these papery bracts, and then this Hattie's pincushion, they call it, in the centre. And then running all the way through it is this lovely geranium sylvaticum. And this is just what it does. Lives amongst other plants, bringing these little purple touches here and there. The whole thing is just glorious. Most of us have boundaries to our gardens. Sometimes they're hedges, fences, walls, and it's really great to think about growing things upwards. Well, on this stand, you're really spoilt for choice when it comes to going up in the air. But I picked out two. This lovely Solanum laxum album. If you look at the flowers carefully, you can see it's related to tomatoes and potatoes, but much more ornamental. It'll flower on and off throughout the spring and summer, but as we move into autumn, that's its very, very special time. Great bunches of small white flowers. Providing you give it a little bit of shelter, it'll probably keep most of its leaves too. But when it comes to leaves, how about its neighbour? This Actinidia tetramera, related to kiwi fruit, but you don't grow it for fruit or anything. It does have small pink flowers at this time of year, but it's its leaves that you really grow it for. It's really good in full sun, and eventually that cream will fade, but isn't it magnificent? It's so eye-catching. And either of these can be grown against a fence, a wall, or in a container. Absolutely brilliant way to introduce height into your garden. Most parts of our gardens are akin to some sort of natural habitat. And when you think about your beds and borders, if anything, they're closest to a meadowy sort of situation. What's a meadow? Lots of grasses along with perennial flowers coming up here and there. Maybe an odd annual or two creeps in, and perhaps a few bulbs. And that's exactly what this garden is doing. And it's something that we could all emulate in our own beds and borders. Look at this great baptisia. Usually baptisia are a deep, brilliant blue, but this one's called Dutch chocolate. I think it's adorable. It's very much a background plant, but look how it mixes and mingles with everything else, rubbing shoulders in your border. It's not a question of chucking out what you've got, far from it. It's building on it, being adventurous, introducing new things that perhaps you hadn't dreamed of before, and your garden will take on a whole new aspect.
More inspiration from Adam Frost now in the last of his nightly guides to designing with plants the Chelsea way. Today he's exploring how we can transport ourselves far and away without setting foot outside our postcode.
One of the great things about coming to the Chelsea Flower Show is designers can take us all around the world. They create atmospheres that just whisk you away. But how do we do that at home? So many of us travel off somewhere beautiful. We have an incredible holiday. We get home a week later, we're feeling just a little blue. But can we bring some of those wonderful holiday memories home and put in our own back garden? I think you could. I really do. But it's not all about the plants. Here, on this balcony, straight away, this says to me, hot, warm. We've got this turquoise in here, soft orange in here. But here in front, even if you can't do something massive, what about a tiny little container outside the door, south-facing, lovely warm, you come out with a cup of tea, and that could be the Mediterranean. So it doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something small and simple. Every time you have that cup of tea, you could just sit there, look at it, and just dream of where you've just been. Where am I? Can you guess? Scotland. Even through our country, but parts of the world, the type of stone that the buildings and the landscape are created from very much set the theme. But what I love about here is not just that shouts at you in that sense, but the different styles of planting. It could be I've been on a lovely woodland walk with a stream running through, a gunnerer with the ferns underneath. It really sort of sets a tone and gives you an essence. That would be really good and easy to do. Line it out so the water doesn't seep away too quickly, and you've got yourself a little woodland walk. And here, you've been up on the moors, and that just reminds you of that wonderful day. I wonder where we're going next. Plants really can evoke real emotion, and that's even individually, but when you put them together, they can take you far, far away. I'm just looking at that planting along there, and I've worked out I could probably do 3 countries. If I look over there, I could be in the Mediterranean, or even South Africa, with the agapanthus, and then the lilies. I turn round, Angelica regersia, classic plants that we use in our gardens, but the moment you add the tree fern in, and the trichodendron, and some ferns, and maybe some hostel, it starts to feel subtropical. And at the back there, what do you reckon? Japan? We instantly think that the only way you can create something is use the plants for that country, but no. Here, what's cleverly done that pulls it all together is there's a simple link in colour, but then the designers played with texture, form, shape. So sometimes it's not necessarily what you plant, but it's how you put them together that could take you somewhere else.
We're heading to Switzerland for our next garden visit. Arit Anderson has been finding out just what it takes to create a Swiss sanctuary right here in the middle of London.
Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Oh, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh, yeah, I think that we've all had enough. They know that we're calling it wrong. Hey, it's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive and save it. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah.
Show garden. I think it's really interesting that you've used Switzerland for your design.
Well, I wanted to showcase the floral diversity across the country. So we instantly have this image of alpine and meadows. So at the front here we've got the Echium and the Pimpinella. But there's also, in the southern side of the Alps, has a Mediterranean climate, which has full of camellias and rhododendrons and roses. So there's a lot of diversity across the floral range.
Yeah, it's amazing. You really wouldn't think that there's this amount of flora and fauna. It's great that you're showing that there's more than just the meadows. I think that's really good to kind of show the visitors that, you know, that where our plants come from as well, because sometimes you look at a certain plant and don't really think about where it's growing. So, I mean, to get all of these different habitats in is great. So, the experience overall, how do you think do you think you'll come back?
I'd definitely come back, yeah. It's really hard work, but there's something addictive about show gardening and having 2 weeks to intensely build with a team, and that I already miss already. So, yeah, I'd come back.
It is addictive. So I'm really glad that we're going to see you back. So well done, well done.
Thank you.
Well, if Lily's Swiss Sanctuary has given you a taste for the Alps, then look no further than our next nursery, who specialise in alpine plants. It's their 10th time exhibiting in the Great Pavilion, and I'll be looking at their display very shortly. But first, let's meet them on their home turf in Scotland as they prepared to head south.
I'm Elise Strang. I've been running the nursery for the last 5 years with a very committed, able team around me, which includes a number of volunteers. This is our nursery here at Coveted Garden Plants, situated in a lovely valley about 8 miles south of Edinburgh in Midlothian. We've got about 3 to 4 acres here, and we're on the banks of the lovely river North Esk, which gives a very idyllic setting. We grow alpine and woodland plants here. The alpine plants come from originally the European Alps, but mountain areas throughout the world. And there's a range of habitats in mountain areas. So there's sunny, well-drained soil high in the mountains, but there's also shady areas and wooded areas, and there's also
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do, and now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. I just gotta get through, I just gotta get through. Cause I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. Sometimes I feel like all is lost, but I know it's not true. I wanna put up all my walls cause I'm not in the mood, but then I cut myself off from the rest of the room. I know.
Now these are incredibly drought resistant, and they would grow anywhere as long as the drainage is really good, it's in full sun, and there's that little bit of lime in the soil as well. That's just what they need to really thrive. This is Primula auricula, which is known as the bear's ear primula, hence the name auricula. If you're in a very wet part of the country, somewhere that has like sort of excessive rainfall throughout the winter period, it would be good just to put it in an unheated greenhouse or something like that, just to stop the winter wet getting in and causing rot within the crown. And if we really want to push the definition of what is an alpine, then I think we should include Meconopsis. These are known as the Himalayan blue poppies, and they need a really nice, moist, fertile site to grow well. They really dislike extremes, so they don't want to be in sort of full sun or a windy position or anywhere like that. They need to be grown somewhere where mosses and ferns grow in that sort of damp, shady environment. We're lucky that with a lot of our plants being sort of alpine and woodland plants, they sort of naturally flower around Chelsea time in May. We don't use heat in any of our plants, sort of heated tunnels to sort of bring them on significantly. All we might do is just sort of move them gently between a shaded tunnel if they're coming on a few days too early.
So here we've got groups from 3 different areas of our display. On this side here, the plants that would grow at a high altitude, and here we have plants from a woodland area, and here we have plants from a meadow area.
So one thing we need to be careful of in our display is that we don't put plants together that don't naturally grow together. This is particularly the case with something like this aster. That grows really high up in sort of rock crevices. Although it looks nice, we would never put that together with something like the trillium. They are botanically not right together. The trilliums are from woodlands of North America, and they wouldn't be allowed next to something like an aster.
Chelsea is a great opportunity for us to show off the plants that we love and share that love with the public coming to visit the show.
The other thing that really makes it worthwhile is just all of the kindness and kind words that the public have to say about our display. It sort of puts all that effort of stress on the nursery, of trying to group everything together. It just makes it all feel worthwhile.
Well, they've certainly got people talking about this because Rachel and Carol and Nick have said, oh, have you been down to see coveted plants? And no, this is the first time I've seen this stand. And it's gorgeous, it really is. And it's one of those stands that you can just see little mini landscapes right across the board here. And I love the way they're trying to reinvent what an alpine is and how we use them in our gardens. And we've got these lovely primulas here enjoying a little bit more moisture at the bottom of the mountain or imaginary mountain, a whole range of lovely little primulas there. And then we come round to the more succulent plants. Now these can cope with they're drought tolerant. So, you know, familiar plants like the sempervivums. And this is a new one on me, this lovely little Eriogonum umbellatum with its chartreuse yellow pom-pom flowers. And horticulturally, this exhibit is absolutely spot on. It got a gold medal. So the combinations of plants really would work nicely in your garden, whether it's a really dry bank or a shaded woodland area on the other side. I'm so glad I got to see it in the end. Now, with our seasons becoming increasingly volatile, our gardens need to cope with our ever-changing weather patterns too. Monty's been taking a look at ways we can make our gardens more resilient.
There was a time not so long ago when the British weather was fairly predictable, maybe not on a day-to-day level, but certainly from season to season. We knew that springs would get warmer and drier, and summers hopefully will be sunny and dry, and in autumn, whatever happened, it would get cooler and damper. But that is changing. Climate change means that it's all been moved around, and what we're getting are extreme weather events. Very wet periods any time of the year. Certainly some very dry periods. This winter was exceptionally dry. And that means as gardeners, we have to rethink what plants we choose and how we grow them. This is the Enchanted Rain Garden by Thame, who is the youngest designer here at Chelsea. She's just 22. It's her first garden and it's fantastic. It's based on a Mancunian wet garden and shows what you can grow and how beautiful it can be despite the wetness. Let's start with the hedge. It's hornbeam. Hornbeam grows much better in wet conditions than beech. They look quite similar. Of course, we all know about hostas. Hostas are the archetypal, damp, shade-loving plant. We've got ferns, many of which just need damp conditions. So what she's done is very simply chosen plants that are not fighting the conditions. You're not trying to overcome them, you're going with them. And actually you can create a garden designed for the wet that looks better and better when it's wetter and wetter. This is the Core Arts Garden designed by Andy Smith-Williams. Now what Andy has done is create the concept of two front gardens, knock down the fence between them to create a shared communal space. And over here we have a tank which collects the rainwater, so therefore the planting in here is for extremely damp conditions. But as you move forward underneath this lovely medlar, this is the corner where Andy says all the rubble was put and the soil is poor and it's very dry. So you have melianthus, you have some herbs growing in there. But as you go across the garden, on this side, you have a more conventional border. The soil has been improved. So we have geums, which generally do better in damper conditions, but if the soil is good, then it will retain moisture, even though it may be very dry for weeks on end. You have euphorbias. Many euphorbias are adapted to dry, hot conditions. You have plants that are adapting, and the best way to enable them to adapt is to improve the organic content of the soil, which means that when it's dry, it will retain moisture, and when it's very wet, it'll drain. So that combination of choosing the right plant for the right place and really making your soil have good structure is the best way to provide adaptability. The RHS Plant of the Year was launched in 2010, intended to help nurseries promote new varieties of plants. And here's Francis with this year's results.
We've had a plethora of new plants this week, but I have a couple more to show you before we reveal the winner of Plant of the Year 2022. This is Heuchera Alfie, and it's been 5 years in the breeding to get to this point. It's got a really lovely chocolatey purple leaf. It's almost green, but with that chocolatey hint, and the underside of that leaf is a much brighter purple. It's really, really beautiful. But the thing about this is its flowers. They're really quite big, not too tall, but the individual flowers are quite big, and they go right the way down the stem. They start off white, and as they fade, they turn to pink and then green. And the nice thing is, once these flowers have gone, you can deadhead them, and they will keep flowering right through the autumn. And it's not just me that likes these flowers. Apparently, they're an absolute magnet for bees as well. Now, heucheras can sometimes be a little bit fussy, but this one isn't. It's really easy to grow. It likes full sun or part shade, but that makes it really great for a beginner gardener as well as a seasoned gardener, of course. And it's because this plant is so dependable and reliable that the breeder here at Plant-A-Go-Go decided to name it after her dad, which is really lovely. And this is the latest introduction from David Austin. It's called Bring Me Sunshine. And it's been through a 10-year period of rigorous trials to get to this point. It was selected from about 6,000 seedlings for its lovely apricot-coloured blooms that are the colour of sunset. Now, it's a really, really good performer, this. It gets to about 3.5 feet, very disease-resistant with very healthy and tidy foliage. And those flowers are so beautiful and joyful, as well as being incredibly fragrant with a scent of myrrh. Now, if you keep deadheading these through the year, they'll flower from now right through until September. And the winner of Plant of the Year 2022 is this rather magnificent Cross-Symponium Destiny, bred by Mark and Daniel at Surreal Succulents. Congratulations, guys. How does it feel to win?
Oh, just over the moon, delighted. It's amazing.
So why is this plant so good, do you think?
So it's the world's first intergenetic cross-species hybrid consisting of Aeonium and Sempervivum. It's amazing because it's got the kind of foliage and vigour of an Aeonium. Mm-hmm. We've also tried to breed in the hardiness of the Sempervivum. So we're trying to basically breed a UK hardy succulent. And this is a really amazing breakthrough because, you know, if we haven't got the hardiness with this actual batch, we've got a genetically compatible plant that we can now cross back into Sempervivum.
That is really amazing. So this one, is it hardy?
We've had it to -2, which is, you know, most Aeoniums are frost tender around sort of 5 degrees, so we're on the right track with it.
So how would you recommend people grow them? Are they good for containers, or would you have them in amongst the borders if you have a very free draining soil? How would
you can grow it in your border. I've got them in my garden at home, just outside in the border. In containers is ideal because they make a real statement piece on a patio. So especially the Destiny, it's just a giant head.
Huge congratulations. Well, you should be very proud, and you should all just have a rest now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Still to come on tonight's coverage of the RHS Chelsea Flower Show 2022, an event supported by the Newt.
I will be meeting Sharleen Spiteri, rock legend turned gardening enthusiast.
Nick Bailey's in the mood for a party over at the Houseplant Studios.
Talking of partying, with the Platinum Jubilee only a week away, Rachel de Thame looks at how Chelsea has evolved since the Queen's Golden Jubilee 20 years ago. It's been a fabulous week here, and great to see newcomers on Main Avenue, but also the veteran garden designers are back in full force. And one man who said in 2019 that was it, his Chelsea story was over, is multiple gold medal winner Chris Beardshaw. But he is back, and for a very special reason, as we recently discovered.
Fairly safe to say this is not a normal day in the design office. I'm on a Shannon-class lifeboat out of Poole Harbour today, and this is all about becoming immersed in the world of the RNLI. To sort of listen, to look, to experience just a snapshot of some of the experiences and so on that the crews feel and the volunteers feel, because by filtering that I'm able to start to sew the threads of the organisation together into a horticultural tapestry.
Man overboard!
I'm doing a man overboard training exercise, and I think I'm about to miss the man. You do need eyes in the back of your head here. We've got a casualty right alongside and a buoy off to our port. That's my first man overboard rescue. If I look as though I know what I'm doing, it's a fluke, honestly, it really is. I think the wind's just blowing me in the right direction.
I guess the biggest reward for me is when you head out on a shout and the people that you're going to have been through quite a stressful situation, and just to be that smiley person there to kind of help them out. I must admit, no shout is ever the same. So when you're heading out, you're kind of in one hand you're excited, but in the other it can be quite daunting. But there's nothing better than that kind of sense of relief when you're heading back down the main channel, back between the quays, back in kind of the brightness and the safety of, almost back at the station.
This special boat is historically important. It's part of the National Maritime Museum's collection. This is the Thomas Kirk Wright. And what fascinates me is the way that they're built. So for instance, timbers, of course, are the traditional material for boat building, certainly when boats like this were built. And so we're using green oak, English green oak, which is harvested from the New Forest within the garden at Chelsea Flower Show. The building within this garden, the sort of retreat, if you like, is made entirely from green oak. And splicing through that to represent the more technologically advanced and the more contemporary RNLI that we experience today is a contemporary arcade. Both of these structures in green oak, again reminiscent of the way in which the boats were built. You can see hanging in the centre of the Georgian pavilion there is that beacon, that light, the symbol, if you like, of a safe return home. And the curvilinear nature of the path informed by the bow wave coming off of a 7-class lifeboat as it hits the waves. And the numbers of stones used represents the numbers of souls lost. Yesterday, for me, well, that was all about accessing the raw material. That's the design inspiration. And so this then becomes the plant palette. And it's from this that as an artist, as a designer, we start to paint. And what we experience at Chelsea is hopefully the masterpiece. The ethos of the design in terms of planting is very much reflecting that intrinsic modesty, the understatedness of the RNLI. It's also about going for understated bloom, so no prima donnas here. This is the subspecies iris. In fact, it's Iris pallida, subspecies pallida. It's a very muted, almost a kind of pewtery blue, very delicate bloom to it. And when you hold it up, you can see slight swelling, which indicates the bud is forming. And once that's slightly more advanced, you start to see it as a little silhouette of the plant in here. And it's just giving me the hint. It might be in flower in time for Chelsea. Superb. Every garden matters, but some perhaps matter a little more than others. It would be very obvious to stick a boat in the middle of Chelsea Showground, surround it with a bit of shingle and a damp bit of seaweed and say, there we go, job done. My garden at Chelsea avoids the pastiche. It's much more about those subtle suggestions of how the organisation touches people, and of course nearly 200 years of history of saving lives at sea.
Chris, you've made again a beautiful garden, absolutely lovely garden, and of course a gold medal, but there's a story behind it. This is very sort of intricately bound up with the RNLI, isn't it?
Yes, every element, every included part is a thread that forms part of the greater narrative.
So just tie it together for me briefly. So we're starting with the building.
So Hillary, who was the man who was responsible for the original idea of the RNLI, came to London and went to a house that was called the London Tavern. And it was a meeting house for the great and the good and the influential.
So that represents
and it's a neoclassical building.
Right.
And so we wanted that neoclassical structure to be at the heart of the garden.
So that's a structure. And the paving here, which is beautiful, that also represents something.
So this is Purbeck stone, of course.
Yes.
Purbeck stone laid down 130 million years ago under warm, calm seas, which seem very appropriate. The curvature is from the bow wave of a lifeboat, and the number of pictures is representative of the number of lives lost since the organisation started.
Now, of course, I mean, that's all symbolic, and that's great, but the planting is the thing. I mean, it is incredibly beautiful, but you've used relatively familiar plants, haven't you?
That was a very deliberate step, because when we met with the RNLI crews, you know, the volunteers, they're ordinary people, and I wanted to celebrate the fact that these are ordinary plants used in extraordinary circumstances, and that fits perfectly with the ordinary people, the ordinary volunteers who go out and do extraordinary things for the RNLI. So that idea of the narrative and the plants reflecting just seemed spot on, really.
Well, I think you have got it spot on. I mean, you're very experienced and you've made lots of beautiful gardens, but I don't think you've ever made a better one.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
Lovely.
We felt very calm with it, and what is very humbling is the response we get from the public and the connections that they make, and so we're thrilled with it, and I'm pleased that we've done the RNLI justice.
Well, thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Chris.
Well, we're nearing the end of the week, so it's a good time to reflect on this year's Chelsea Flower Show. And I'm here with the Director General of the RHS, Sue Biggs. Sue, lovely to see you. Have you had a good week? It's great to be back in May, isn't it?
It's wonderful to be back in May, and the sun is shining, unlike the hail and thunder and rain that we've had during the week. So it's gorgeous, really glorious to be back. And I mean, September was wonderful, and it was great to see such a different plant palette. But somehow this feels really right that you're kicking off the season coming forward. As all of our gardens are bursting in, you can come and get inspired at Chelsea.
Totally. I think for a one-off, September was lovely. You couldn't do it every year. There's a limited plant palette as well, but it's just great to be back. So many gardens this year as well.
I know, record of 39 gardens. I don't know how you're keeping up with them all.
Well, we're struggling. There's a lot of them to cram in. But at the same, I mean, the range across the board. We've got all sorts of gardens here, you know, and
widest ever, I think.
And a range of designers and ages of designers, you know, the young designers.
Well, we made a deliberate attempt this year, as we have been over recent years, to try and get in a lot of new young people coming into horticulture, because not everyone has the joy of really having a huge big garden themselves. So we introduced, you know, the balcony gardens, the container gardens, the houseplant studios. So that's been fantastic. And some of these sanctuary gardens, and a lot of them are designed by first-timers at Chelsea and very young people who are in their early 20s and are amazingly talented.
Amazing. So there's a whole generation coming through and trying to steal my job. It's terrible.
Well, they care about the plants and they care about the planet. So
absolutely.
It's a great career to be in.
And Project Giving Back, you know, they sponsor quite a few gardens here with very important messages as well. How important are they to the show and to the RHS?
I think in my 12 years as DG, I have to say it's been the most altruistic thing anyone has ever done. They were watching what was going on and were really worried for the charity sector, that they weren't going to get the publicity that they normally get from Chelsea when we couldn't operate it and run the show in 2020. So they set this up to offer 12 of the 39 gardens were sponsored by Project Giving Back.
It's fantastic.
And just to get the message of the charity out was amazing.
Yeah, some wonderful gardens.
Beautiful gardens.
And a lot of the gardens now are going to move on to a final destination, which is great. And you're going to stipulate that going forward, aren't you?
Yes, it is. I mean, this year, 25, I think I'm right in saying 25 of the 39 gardens are moving on en masse, the whole garden. All the other gardens, the plant material and all the components are already going on.
Yeah, that's
But
wonderful.
yes, it will become that and sustainability. Those two things are really coming in very strongly into the future.
Now listen, Sue, this is your last year as DG.
It is.
How are you feeling? I mean, we're all going to miss you.
Oh, I'm going to miss you, all of you as well. I've loved it. It's been the most. It's been such an honour and a privilege to be Director General of the RHS. And it's been 12 years of joy and some moments of not joy. COVID wasn't great, but on the other hand, it was great for gardening. And 3 million more gardeners in this country and lots more RHS members. So I'm going out very happy as a DG, and I know it's going to be in safe hands into the future, and I shall look forward to coming back to standing on that side of the garden watching you next year.
Well, good. We'll see you next year. You've done a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
There's no question that Sue has been a really influential figure in the world of gardening, not just here at Chelsea or with the RHS, but actually for all of us. And it's been a pleasure knowing and working with her, and I wish her all the best for the future. And as we head into the weekend, here's Nick Bailey with his guide to green terriers with that Friday feeling.
It's the end of the week and I think I know just where to go. This is Planet Studio and it's inspired by Studio 54. Fancy a drink? You know, it's like your very own plant-based disco, and there's all sorts of influences in here. This whole space is full of quirky, unusual and retro houseplants, and this is a great example. This is called Tillandsia usinoides, and it's a form of bromeliad. It comes from South America. It loves to be misted, likes a humid atmosphere. Of course, it doesn't have any roots at all. And then once or twice a year, it will flower for you with the tiniest little lime green blooms that have the most incredible scent that will fill your backyard disco. Now, looking across to the bar in the background here, this really represents what went on in Studio 54 back in the day, while characters were doing shady things in shady corners. Now, while it's nice to treat yourself on a Friday night, let's not forget your houseplants deserve a treat as well. So I've come into the plant clinic, and this is all about looking after your plants and giving them the very best. So over here is the steam room, and this is all these fantastic little terrariums, which of course are little sealed units, so the plants exist in that sort of sealed set of moisture over there. Behind me is the jacuzzi, or a plant propagation station. And so these plants, like these giant monsteras, you can easily propagate just as water cuttings like this. And this at the back is the solarium. And of course it's just LED lights, but it's a great way of providing that full range of light wavelengths to keep plants alive in darker areas like this. And then finally, in the corner here, it's the juice bar. And of course these are liquid fertilisers that you can use to keep your house plants happy, healthy, and looking fantastic in your home. This space is known as a room to dance, and what a fantastic vibe it's got. It feels very minimalist and very chilled out. All the plants are suspended, so you get to see the beautiful silhouettes of them set off against this white background. Of course, many of them are jungle plants, and there's a nod to that in this rattan which runs all the way through the room. And then just beside me here is a very common but very useful houseplant. It's known commonly as pothos, and it's brilliant because it will happily trail out of a container like this, or you can train it to go upwards as well. And then finally, up here is Hoya. This is a fantastic houseplant. It's evergreen, so it looks good year-round, but once a year it will come into bloom with fantastic clusters of flowers that are really strongly scented and will absolutely fill this space with wonderful fragrance. This is a lovely space, and what better way to end your evening?
Sharleen Spiteri rose to fame in the 1990s as the lead singer of the Scottish rock band Texas. Now she combines the hectic life of touring with a more gentle-paced existence on her 25-acre farm in North Wales with her chef husband, Bryn. The woodland gardens and allotments are a passion for Sharleen, who grows all the produce for her husband's restaurant. She says that gardening clears her head and gives her clarity of mind. And she's here with me now. Hello, welcome.
Monty, how are you?
How did you get into gardening? Where did you begin?
Do you know what? My granddad had a little allotment across the road on the bowling green from my grandparents' house, and we used to go across. And it's weird because the gardening and songwriting thing kind of melded into one. And both my parents are great gardeners, were great gardeners as well. And I just always really enjoyed that sort of focus I feel very at ease in the garden.
But for you, food is the big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, food is the big thing. I mean, vegetables, again, was part of my granddad's allotment. And we are now, like, producing. I mean, I don't do all the work. I have to say, my brother-in-law, Gareth, he's the one that does all the work. But I'm always putting my, like, last year we grew Vesuvian tomatoes for the first time. And so when I'm travelling as well, I find different seeds and different things, and I'm like, oh, we should try this. Yeah. But everything we grow is heritage breeds, and that's how we go. But I love my flowers and I love my plants as well.
So when you're touring with the band, do you turn your gardening head off, or is it still there?
No, it's always there.
Yeah.
I literally take photographs whenever I'm travelling. I'm like, oh, I like that, or what is this plant, or can I grow this plant? I have my little app that I zap things and see if I can grow it in the UK or if it's possible. So yeah, I mean, I was saying to you earlier, I just came back from Alabama yesterday, and I literally went to the garden centre. I can't help myself.
How many rock goddesses go to the garden centre when on tour? Have you had a good chance to look around?
What was really interesting for me, it's the first time that I've actually come into some of the gardens. And as amazing as it is to stand and look at the gardens from the outside, suddenly being in the gardens and how the sound changes is extraordinary, and seeing it from this point of view.
See, that's a musician talking about the sound, but it's interesting, isn't it?
But the sound is so important in the garden. I mean, we go between London and Wales, and the sound is very different in London to is in Wales, and we have different sounds around us. But I know that when I still even go into my garden in London, just the way that we've done the garden, it's almost like it deadens the sound that's outside of the traffic and stuff like that. And it's about making it that peaceful place that you can hear the wind, and you can hear all like the movement within the garden. I know I begin to sound like a hippie here, but it is really important.
And was there any one thing that you felt was
you know what I was really interested to see? I really wanted to go and see the garden that was built that's going to the school for the children. That they felt enclosed in a safe space, that they could talk. And I was really interested to see that. That was what I did want to see. That garden. I went to see it, which is fantastic.
I love it. Yeah.
It is really. It does feel very. Feels like a hug.
Yeah.
You know, when you sit there, it's like it feels really special.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming to talk to us.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's almost the Platinum Jubilee, and I'm here with the Platinum Jubilee orchid, which has just been launched. It's a lovely Vanda orchid. And all this week, we've been looking at how Chelsea and our tastes in gardening have changed during the Queen's reign. Here's Rachel with the trends we saw in the Golden Jubilee year, 2002.
It's 2002, the dawn of a new millennium, and Her Majesty the Queen is celebrating her Golden Jubilee. 50 years on from where she took the throne, the UK is a very different country. The rise of technology is revolutionising how we connect with each other and the rest of the world. In popular culture, brand and image take centre stage as we usher in the age of the celebrity. In this new world, the Chelsea Flower Show is determined not to be left behind. Echoing the trailblazing spirit of the day, garden designers find fame with their cutting-edge designs. From the sleek and high-end, to the outlandish and futuristic and modern takes on the quintessentially British cottage garden. At Chelsea, anything goes. For the Queen, it's a family affair, as Prince Charles has co-designed the Healing Garden, dedicated to the late Queen Mother. Its naturalistic feel is a sign of things to come, as the age of gardens for the greater good is just around the corner.
Standing here on the Rewilding Britain Landscape Garden, 2002 suddenly feels like a very long time ago, because in 2022 it's much more about gardening for the natural landscape, for wildlife, for our mental health and physical well-being. And so whilst back in 2002 Prince Charles was planting herbs and so on his garden. Here it's about the natural landscape, and in fact helped along by the actions of the beaver in creating their own ecosystem. So there are native trees throughout and plants we'd recognise from our own garden, the foxgloves, the flag irises and the hellebores. The garden encourages us to let go, be relaxed about weeds, at least in part of the garden. It's all about gardening for the greater good. Since 2002, there's been a definite decline in traditional cottage garden type planting as new perennial planting really came to the fore. But I feel at this year's show, particularly here on the Morris & Co garden, that the two things have really hybridised. And what we've got is a wonderful, very fluid evocation of that cottage garden look. So the perennials, rather than being in blocks of 3s and 5s and rather formal, here they're just dotted amongst one another. The anchusa flows into the aquilegia, the geum into the bascum. It's all a wonderful sort of free-for-all. It's really a much more holistic, much softer approach to creating a garden. In 2002, Chelsea was all about the show gardens on Main Avenue, and they were showy. And then last year, they created a new category here at the show for container and balcony gardens. And they're filled with great ideas, like here. This is the J-Day garden. Here in the front, for example, we've got a hazel in a container, and that can be coppiced to keep it to a manageable size. But what I also love is that there's a metal grid right across the floor space, and it's elevated above more planting. There are mosses and ferns growing literally underfoot. It feels as if you're hovering above them. Where Chelsea was largely aspirational before, it's now saying you may have a small space, but it can be fabulous.
There's no question that gardens both follow trends and create them, and particularly at Chelsea, you see those both things. But this year, what do you think is new that not new, but what do you particularly take away from it?
Well, I did a lot of research for my bee garden, and it's swarming with bees and pollinators, and it just shows how easy it is to plant for them. So I'm always going to take that with me. I think any garden I'm involved in, I'm going to think about pollinators. How about you?
Well, I think for me, I'm particularly interested in gardening and mental health. And the fact that that is starting to appear, people are talking about it and reflecting it in the gardens, I think is a really good thing.
It's a wonderful thing. Yeah. Well, here's our BBC Two family with the ideas and inspiration they'll be taking away from this year's show.
If I could take one thing home from Chelsea, it would be Sarah Epley's building. It is amazing. Mind you, I don't think I've actually got the room.
My choice is a tulip I've not grown before called Bronze Perfection, and it's so beautiful. Look at that blend of colours. It's mid-season, so April to May, grows to about 50 centimetres in height, and as a bonus, it's fragrant.
My favourite at Chelsea this year just has to be the Coveted garden plant stand. It's utterly lovely, but within it I've had to choose two plants. Fritillaria camshatensis, which loves a shady place with these dark, dangerous flowers. And in complete contrast to Lusianskira ovata, whose pure white flowers open at night and emit the most delicious perfume.
If there's one thing I'll take away, it's the idea of using these cork tiles outdoor in garden applications. I think they look really dramatic, and this natural feel to them really is going to work in a garden setting. And the good thing is that they're sustainable and good for the environment.
My take home from Chelsea this year has absolutely got to be the bascums. They are firmly back on the table. They appear in loads of different gardens and nursery stands, and a real star is a plant I haven't seen for years. Bascum Helen Johnson. It has that really interesting kind of muted apricot brownie note. It's absolutely beautiful. It looks brilliant in gravel gardens, and it works equally well through herbaceous borders. So the bascums are my plants to take home from Chelsea.
One thing I've loved seeing at this year's Chelsea is this. This is true valerian, or Valeriana officinalis, which is often overlooked for the red valerian, which isn't really valerian at all. This one is the herbal one with the root that you use in a tea that's nice and sleepy. It's also got a lovely scent. I can smell it coming over the wall from here. And it's just great seeing it in lots of different show gardens around the site this year.
Well, that's almost it from us, but there's still time for Ask Monty and Joe. Here we go. Shirley Henderson asks, I have a peony in my garden. Every year it has only 3 or 4 flowers on it. I have always seen and read that peonies have lots of flowers on them, so why not mine? What advice can you give to improve this, please? Many thanks.
Well, the first thing one would always say is, have you planted it too deep?
Common mistake, especially if you move one as well. You plant it too
planted
deep.
so just the neck is at soil level. Any deeper will inhibit flowering.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's usually the problem, a bit too deep. Okay, Carl Mills asks, how do I stop ants and greenfly attacking my apple trees?
Well, ants don't attack apple trees. What's almost certainly happening is the ants are farming the greenfly, which are aphids, in order to drink and eat their sweet exudates. So, and the greenfly might be eating the leaves.
I would just leave them. I mean, hopefully ladybirds will come along and they'll munch on, and you'll get a balance.
And also, that's the key, is everybody gets an estate about this. The tree might be eaten a little bit, it'll be fine. Because nature will balance itself out. It's wildlife, it's nature.
Yeah, don't start spraying stuff. We don't need any of that. Pamela Dobby asks, hi Monty Joe, I have left a much-loved garden of 28 years and bought divisions of plants to start a new one. They were planted last autumn and seem to be doing well, except for a clump of acanthus, which is badly mildewed. Soil is clay. Help! Well, that's one of the easiest plants to move because it's hard to get rid of. I mean, you take root cuttings, or once you've got a root of that, but mildew...
Well, it means the thing about acanthus is, be very careful what you wish for, because it's one of the most invasive plants there is.
Yeah, but it's air circulation usually, isn't it? It's probably just in an area where the air isn't circulating properly, I would say.
One more.
I've had an olive tree in a big pot for about 15 years. Would it be okay to transfer it to the garden, or would I be better off leaving it in the pot? I would be devastated if I killed it. That's from Marion Langan.
You can transfer it to the garden, but it does need good drainage.
Yeah, it depends on what sort of soil you've got.
If you've got clay soil, repot it, take it out, clean it off the roots and repot it. Otherwise, try it in the garden.
Plenty of sun, much sun as you can possibly give it, I would say.
Okay, right. Well, we will be back on BBC Two at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening for a special highlight show, looking back at what has been, again, a wonderful week at the Chelsea Flower Show 2022. But until then, goodbye.
Bye-bye.